Hi.
Hi.
Please introduce yourself.
Sure. I'm Desiree Endries. I have been podcasting since 2018, like the end of the year in 2018. Um, so about 4 years, actually just over 4 years now. And I also have two little kids, live in the Pittsburgh area, and my podcast is called Minimalish.
Awesome. Thank you.
Yeah.
So, what made you want to get into podcasting? I watched, or not watched, listened to a couple of your episodes, and I know that you mentioned how you kind of happened upon it, and then some things changed along the way. It was like once a family podcast, and now you're doing it on your own. So, can you tell me a little bit about that process?
Yeah. Um, I basically got into podcasting because I really loved listening to podcasts at the time. I would listen to a podcast called The Happy Hour with Jamie Ivey, like on my commute to work every day. I was a teacher at the time, commuting 30 minutes. So there was that part of it. I've always been kind of like doing creative little endeavors in some way or another. I blogged for a while, just on and off, just kind of for fun, because writing is the thing I enjoy the most, really. And then my husband and I like learned about minimalism. We decluttered our whole home, and it just was this really life-changing thing that made me want to share it with other people. So for some reason, it just popped into my head to like do it in a podcast instead of write about it. But podcasting really is writing about it in a lot of ways because I script a lot of things. So yeah, that's how I got into it. And I really just taught myself all the things I needed to learn to be able to do it.
So when it comes to scripting, how do you generate like fresh ideas? I think minimalism, there's a lot of content out there already, not to say that it's saturated, but how do you provide, fresh content for your listeners? And I guess like for somebody who doesn't really know much about minimalism, like how do you introduce that topic to them in an easily digestible way?
Yeah. So that's like, I feel like the question that I'm always asking myself too, because when it comes down to it, minimalism is kind of the topic where people who are searching for that will find me. But I talk about other things. I kind of like put it under the umbrella of intentional living, motherhood. It, it is mostly kind of just like how do we live intentionally, more simply, with a family, kind of is the main topic umbrella. And with that said, like this year, I kind of was asking myself that same question of, okay, but how do I reach people who are just starting, but also people who like listened 4 years ago and who are kind of continuing this journey? I don't want to be, talking about the same thing over and over of just like, there's not that many different ways we can talk about how to declutter the bathroom, right? So I think the main thing is I've begun working kind of like quarterly and seasonally in a way of just like brainstorming topics based on that season, based on what's happening in that season, and really thinking about how do you live intentionally in each season? It's going to look different, right? It's going to look different whenever the kids are back to school for my like specific audience member. Um, it's going to look different during the holiday season. It's going to look different in the winter than it is in the summer. So I have been brainstorming in that way, and that's helped a lot. Just
Mhm.
generate ideas of like guests to reach out to, and also like what I'm going to talk about because I do both. I do guest episodes and episodes on my own. Something else that when I kind of I've been doing it for 4 years. So there was a point recently where I kind of was running out of ideas of like my own episodes. And I didn't want to do all guests because it's just like always how I've done things. And when I am scripting and writing, those are my own episodes. And I love that. It's just like eventually I was kind of in a creative slump. So something I did was I just gave myself this like overarching topic. I do two of those episodes a week. And so I've always asked these questions to my guests, and they've changed a little bit along the way, but they've generally been like, what's something you're simplifying and what's something that you're loving? Just like fun little questions. And then I always talk about a lot of my solo episodes have been like something I'm learning, but I didn't really name it that. A lot of times when I write and share on social media, it's that too. So I gave myself this umbrella of like one episode a month is something I'm simplifying, one episode a month is something I'm learning. And it's really helped me just to have like an overarching topic that I'm writing to. And it hasn't been as, I don't know, like, I don't know how to explain it, but it hasn't, like, I thought it was going to be like every episode was going to be like something I'm learning,
Mhm.
blah, 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 blah. It just kind of has stemmed out of that.
Yeah.
So my recent episodes, I ended up doing 2 this month on something I'm learning, and it was just about decluttering my kids' stuff. And I didn't even call it something I'm learning. It's just the fact that like it kind of stemmed out of that overarching umbrella, if that makes sense.
Yeah, got you. So you'd mentioned like how you break up your podcast into individual episodes and guest episodes. When it comes to having guests or interviewees, how do you prepare for that? Because it sounds like, and correct me if I'm wrong, but like those are more organic conversations that probably aren't scripted. So like, what does your preparation process look like for that?
Yeah. So in the beginning, I really even wrote out my questions, kind of like scripted what I would say
Mhm.
to like lead up to a question just until I got more comfortable. And so that was something that I did. And I never really actually read directly off the script, but it helped me be less nervous, especially when I was talking to guests that were bigger names and I never thought would actually, come on the show. Then I was just super nervous. And I still will do that every once in a while if I like go out of, you know, my league and ask someone who I'm like, sure, they're not going to say yes, and they do. But now it's more so I just generate a list of questions. I kind of start out the same way every time. I always ask the guests like who they are, what they do, to introduce themselves. And then I always end in the same way with the 2 questions that I ask every guest. And then the middle is just based on, what the specific topic is. And it's usually I try to keep to like 6 questions, and that's always more than enough.
Yeah. So, still on the realm of like podcasting, when it comes to editing, how have you seen like that process change over time? Like, I'm sure you've learned a lot along the way. So, like, can you take me through like when you first started podcasting to now and like what that process has looked like over time?
Yeah. So editing, specifically, I actually have used the same program the whole time. I don't know why I went right away with Adobe Audition, which I had to pay for. Like, there are free options, but for some reason, I think I like watched a YouTube video to learn how to do it, and that's what they were using. And it is really simple. I tried to downgrade to the like GarageBand or I forget the other one.
I know there's Audacity.
Yeah, Audacity. I tried to, but since I was so used to like the process with Audition, I was like, I'm not going to do this. It's so much work putting an episode together, and I do all the editing right now still. So I just never really downgraded. But so from in the beginning, I think like I learned from YouTube videos, to be honest, and uh my editing process is still similar, I would say, to maybe like 10 episodes in. I learned some different, very basic minimum settings that I use that I honestly still don't even know really what they mean. I just know that they make they level the volume a little bit. I use like single band compressor and normalizing. Those are the 2 settings that I use. And there have been times where I played with other things, but I think the biggest thing that's changed is I you could probably tell like I'm a talker and I will explain everything to in great detail. So especially both types of episodes, really, I try to edit myself down a lot. And I
Yeah.
think that's the biggest thing that's changed is like I try to get to the point. I've had reviews that have said that. And I do have I have mostly positive reviews. I'm really grateful for that. But I take the negative ones that are at least like nice to heart of just like, critiques.
Yeah.
So yeah, I try to edit myself down a lot and make sure it gets to the point. I do a lot of editing in that respect. And I also edit out a lot of like silences. Just because when I'm recording my self solo, I pause a lot. So that's the biggest things that I think I didn't do in the beginning that I do now.
Got you. So can you tell me a little bit about like the startup costs? Like, did you have the same setup equipment that you have now? And like, how has the cost changed from when you first started to now, I guess?
Yeah. So in the beginning, I bought a $20 like USB mic off of Amazon, and I actually bought two of them because I did it with my husband in the beginning and tried to figure out how to do it with two microphones, and it worked fine. And I had bought like a secondhand computer that was $300 a Mac, and I still have that same computer, so it's almost dying, but it's working still. I would say, the startup costs, other than just getting a microphone, which you don't have to get an expensive one to start, and I wouldn't recommend an expensive one, are just kind of your hosting platforms. And so I used Libsyn. It's a really popular one that ended up being about $20 a month once I was getting like a lot of downloads and recording longer episodes. Um, I had a website and everything as well, and a newsletter and things like that. So if you really want to like do the marketing aspect and be easy to find online, then it might cost a little bit more. But I would say that it's less than one would think, I think. Even this microphone, which is a more expensive one, but not super expensive. It's definitely an upgrade, and it's a really nice microphone. We got it secondhand. So even now, doing this 4 years later, and I've had 2 million downloads, I just keep it simple, and I don't think, you don't need the fancy things.
Yeah.
Unless you like them, that's fine too.
So like, what is your setup like now? I see that you have a mic. It looks like your room might be soundproofed a little. I don't know like what's hanging behind you or
Yeah, it's really hopefully you can't hear my baby in the background
I
because
can't.
she's just talking. This mic is pretty good at that, uh, just blocking things out. But um, this is like a tapestry type thing. I got it to just cover some like marks on the wall when we first moved
Oh,
in. But
okay.
then I realized that it does help with soundproofing because it's just like putting a carpet on the wall. So otherwise, I'm in a pretty small room in the house, our smallest bedroom. It's not super small. I used to be in an even smaller room, which was better in our old house, but this room has less windows than that one. So I don't really have, like I said, not many frills, but I used to have foam on the walls, and then I replaced it with this, which I really didn't realize soundproofed it. I just liked the look of it. So
Okay.
yeah.
So, you had briefly touched on like the marketing element of it. How did you like generate ideas for marketing and like planning that out, I guess? Like when it comes to content that you're going to put out on a weekly or monthly or bi-weekly basis, can you tell me a little bit more about that process and like how you actually planned it out from start to finish?
Yeah. So I think with like in the beginning with marketing your podcast and getting listeners, the most important thing is having people that are going to listen from the start. And even if that's like family members and friends, and, even if they're not interested in the topic that you're talking about, just having people to kind of download and share with others
Mhm.
is really helpful. When I started, I didn't have like a social media following or anything like that. I think I was like sharing motherhood things. For I was only a mom for like 8 months before we started, but so not for long, maybe like 4 months. And I had gotten a few followers that might be interested in like minimalism and the things that I was sharing. But the biggest thing was just having that little like startup group of people. And I think I had tried to get like 20 people. And I usually recommend that if you have a bigger following already, then if you can get more. And it's kind of like having a launch team that really helped in the beginning. And I also tell people to like put a couple of episodes out in the beginning as well. Because it's just to kind of play with the algorithm a little bit of getting lots of downloads from the start. On that like first day when you're releasing episodes, then it kind of bumps you and you're easier to find on Apple Podcasts or Spotify or whatever. So, and then you get those same people to give you a review. Um, that is even better. So that's kind of what I say is like, get your friends and family to help you out in the beginning. And that was really hard for me because, and I think it's hard for a lot of people because it's kind of, it feels like, I don't know, it feels even more embarrassing, like with
Yeah.
just the people that already know you. Like
And
anytime someone still that knows me tells me they're listening to me, I'm like, oh, okay. Like I'd rather it be strangers, but okay. Um, but yeah, so I think that's the main thing is like starting well. But beyond that, the biggest thing I use Instagram and I try to send out a newsletter. Right now in my life, I don't have that much time for that, but I think that those are two helpful things. Some people use ads. There's so many different ways to do it. I have found the best way to like get yourself out there, tell people about your podcast is to be a guest on other podcasts
Mhm.
and have guests on yours. And they don't have to be big names, just like people who are going to share with the people who follow them that they were on your podcast. And then when you're on another podcast, well, that's like a really great opportunity because you have 20 to 40 minutes with someone else's listeners, you know?
That's cool. So I kind of want to pivot a little bit and talk about like monetization and also looking at Spotify versus Apple Podcasts. Have you seen like a difference in engagement or do you monetize your podcast? I think that's the first question I should ask.
Yeah, I do. Can we pause for 1 sec?
Yes, of course.
Okay, sorry. Okay, so I do monetize. I I'm gonna be honest that I mostly look at like Apple podcast stats, but I work with a network now, and I know they are looking at Spotify too, and they work with like Spotify ads. So I don't really know because that is part of my podcast that I have kind of outsourced in a way. Just like working with a network, they handle all of the ads. But in the past, I've worked with like different ways with advertisers, and that's the main way I monetize is just through advertisers. And I do mid-roll ads. I've worked directly with um, different companies, and that is just a lot of work for me. I'm not good at that kind of stuff of just like sending invoices and things. That's not why I started to do this. So
Yeah.
it's not my favorite. And then I've worked with kind of like a person who's just like in the middle. They don't work for the advertisers, they don't work for the podcasters. They're just like helping connect you. And now I work with I'm in Cloud 10 Network, and they have lots of like different podcasts under their network, and they are like on the podcaster side. They help connect you with the advertisers. So they do pretty much all of it. They just send me the scripts, which is nice.
Okay. That's cool. So, what uh, advice would you give somebody who's like a new podcaster if they did want to eventually monetize? And I guess maybe talk about like how you started getting into the monetization of your podcast a little bit.
Yeah. So I think you can go two different ways, and you should just know like what your purpose is as a podcaster. Like, are you podcasting for the love of podcasting and you want to, like, this is your thing and you want to just make an income so that you can keep podcasting? Or are you podcasting as a kind of marketing effort for other things that you sell and do? So I know a lot of podcasters, they are monetizing with their own products, whether that's, and even, it can be a little bit of both. Like you might have merch or something like that, or you might use Patreon and send out extra bonus episodes. So it can be both. If you have a course and that's like part of what you do, but you also want to monetize to have ads because you can do all the things. But I think the main advice that I have is to just know, what feels right for you, what works for you, and the time that you have, and you can change along the way. Like that's okay. I know a lot of podcasters change from having ads to not having ads and monetizing with their own stuff. Go back and forth, if you want to work with advertisers, it does take some time. But I would say, it depends on what your podcast is about. If you have a very niche podcast, you might not have as like the volume of downloads of a podcast that might reach a broader group of people, like a podcast about motherhood. That's a broad group of people. But a podcast about, I don't know, race cars. I don't know why that came to my mind, but that's like a very niche group of people. But you might be able to reach out to advertisers in that network, even if you have 500 downloads an episode, 1,000 downloads an episode. Like that is on the lower end of working with advertisers if you're looking at the grand scheme of things. But if you're looking at a very niche market, then you might want to start reaching out directly to advertisers. And I would say, like in the beginning, that's a good way to do it in general. If you do have, anywhere, a lot of advertisers want a podcast that has 10,000 downloads an episode or more, 7,500 or more on the lower end. And so if that's the way that you want to monetize your podcast going forward, it's difficult to get there for a lot of people. But like if you want to work with a network or something, a lot of networks are looking at it for those bigger numbers. But reaching out to companies directly that are going to benefit from getting in front of your audience, then that is a good way to start. There's also a network. Well, it's not really a network. It's just a company called AdvertiseCast. And that's what I started with. And I got a couple of ads through them, but then I started working with a company that could kind of help me a little bit more and I wouldn't have to handle it all on my own. But that's a good place to start too. I think they have a kind of a baseline number that you have to reach. And I don't know what it is, but I do know, I think it's on the lower end. But I would say, if you are just starting a podcast, if you're not sure how your numbers are going to, like where your numbers are going to grow to, then there's so many other ways to do it.
Yeah.
Even if you just have like 100, 200 people listening an episode, you can still just like throw an ad in there for your own course or something else you're selling, or, go ahead.
Is like, what was your rationale for getting into the monetization space, and like at what stage in your journey did you actually go ahead and make that decision to introduce ads on your podcast?
Yeah, that's a good question. I think like the biggest way I rationalized it or just like decided on doing it is the time it takes to podcast. And also at the time I was staying at home with my daughter and I wanted to make some income from home. So I realized that, this is a way to do it. And I decided to go the route of ads because it did not take like an additional, like if you're running a course or doing other things or making other products,
More work.
yeah, that's just like a whole other thing you're doing,
Yeah.
So it allows you to make money like directly just from podcasting, not having to do the extra thing other than just like record the ads, try out products, things like that.
So was that like within the first year or a couple months? Like, I guess timeline wise, like where did you feel comfortable to start introducing ads?
Yeah. I think from the beginning, I got advice. I don't remember where it came from, but I got advice that if you want to have ads, then might as well like start introducing it as soon as you can. Like if you know from the beginning that you want to have ads, and on the first episode put an ad break, but you don't necessarily have an advertiser at that point. So you're maybe just putting in an ad break, and if you have something where you've like signed up to be an affiliate, then you can advertise that. Or if you have some kind of like freebie download for your email list, advertise that. So it could be anything. Even if you just put in an ad break to like talk about a resource and it doesn't give you anything, but it just gets your listeners used to like, oh, this is the structure of the podcast. I think I definitely did that from the beginning because my podcast is kind of in that realm of like simple living and minimalism. I was like, I better start from the beginning that like, this is something I'm doing because like there can be, people can be like, oh, well, you're advertising, even though you're talking about minimalism, but of course we all still use stuff and
Yeah,
things.
I mean,
So,
it's money and like effort costs, like at some.
right.
So I do want to pivot a little bit and talk more about like the personal aspect of podcasting. So you seem to be very open, sharing your story, your journey through motherhood, and like using your children's names and whatnot. So like, can you tell me about like the decision to maybe disclose certain information and choose not to disclose other information, just in the realm of protecting your family's privacy?
Yeah. I think like that is something that I never expected my podcast to grow how it did. So in the beginning, like if I could have changed things and went backwards, maybe I would have. I don't really know because I didn't think about that too much in the beginning. At this point, I try to just be like as real of a person as possible to the people listening because I mean, that's just who I am. I am a very open and honest person. So I use my children's names. I always have. I share their faces on social media. But I try not to show like any, and this is really more so social media. I try not to disclose like any immediate places. I worry about location tracking and things like that. So I try to do that. That's the main thing like that I look at for privacy now. There have been times where I've like archived all my posts where their faces are seen. Um, and who knows if I'll do that in the future. With the level of that I'm at right now, I don't feel too nervous about that. I do feel pretty safe with my audience, but the world is a crazy place. So
Yeah.
who knows? So yeah, I would say that like it's definitely something to think about and think about it in the beginning if you can. Like just imagine what would happen if your podcast does grow more than you would have thought, because it is hard to go backwards in podcasting. Like, yes, I can archive all the faces on social media, but I cannot take their names out of. I couldn't like there was no reason for me to not share my second kid's name because it would be really hard back to go back and like edit my first kid's name out of every
Yeah,
episode where I've mentioned it.
exactly. So another thing that I had like stumbled across when like just learning more about you, about your podcast, was your journey through postpartum. And I kind of want to know like how you dealt with that while also like continuing your podcast. Did you ever have to take a hiatus? How did you like stay motivated through that process? And like I don't know because I'm not a mom, but like I'm sure that that's a really hard thing to go through. So can you, if you're comfortable, do you mind sharing more about that?
Yeah. So my podcast has been on hiatus a few times. And postpartum was one of them. And it was a little bit different than I probably would have done it if like it was a different situation. So I am currently my computer. Hold on, let me plug my computer in. I just don't want it to die. Okay, there we go. Um, so I'm currently going to be leaving my teaching job in 11 days. So I am, when I was pregnant, I knew that like I have either a podcast or I'm a teacher, and I'm a virtual teacher right now. So I had to decide, like, I knew with two kids, I can't do both things. And when I originally started my podcast, I was just home with my first daughter. And then in 2020, when the world was crazy and everyone kind of like a lot of people shifted gears, I decided to go back to teaching, but in a virtual setting. And when I did that, I continued the podcast for a while. There was a point in or like early 2021 where I took a long break because it was really hard for me to continue both. And by taking a long break, it's more so like I took a break from monetizing. I would maybe have an episode out, once a month or so. I tried to keep it up because I never wanted to fully let it go. And when I got pregnant with my second child, I kind of knew that once she came, I was going to either go forward and try to make sure I can make an income from my podcast to what I need it to be, or I'm going to have to just teach and like maybe podcast as a hobby every once in a while. So that is where I was. And I had my network reach out to me in May, which was a month after I had her. So I think I took maybe a few weeks off, just still not knowing what I was going to do. And then Cloud 10 reached out to me. And at that point, I was like, I need to start putting an episode out every week so that I can keep up and be in this network, and this can become an actual income for me. So I would say, I've definitely taken breaks. It has been something where I just never really had a full plan in the beginning. When I saw it grow, I did think I wanted it to be my full-time job, but then I kind of got scared of like, it's not a salaried career. So, that's what I thought I should have. So I just jumped back into teaching, and now I'm just finally deciding to go full force
Now
forward
you're
into
jumping back
podcasting.
into teaching.
Yep.
That's awesome. So like when you did take these hiatuses, I don't know if that's the right tense,
Yeah.
um, did you notice any like wavering support from your listeners? Did they have anything to say about it? Because I know a lot of people tend to be scared to take these breaks because of how their listeners might react or respond. Like they might not tune in as much, or they might try and find someone else to switch, their support over to.
Yeah, I think the main thing I saw was that eventually my downloads did kind of level off. I saw a lot of growth in the beginning, and it was easy to see like that they were, per episode, it kept growing and growing, until a certain point in, like, it probably went up to like 11 to 13,000 per episode at one point. And then once I did stop consistently releasing, this was that time when I took a hiatus in 2021, I saw it maybe go, level out, go down a little bit to in between 10 and 11,000 per episode. Um, Eventually, I think like postpartum, that kind of happened again. But otherwise, I think starting back up consistently, it's been harder to see the same like growth path that I saw in the very beginning, just starting back up over breaks. And I don't know if that's mostly due to, I don't know. I have no idea if it's due to like the algorithm and something having momentum in the beginning, or if it's due to just like my inconsistency for a while, and maybe losing some listeners along the way, which is fine because it's life and you have to do what you have to do. So I think, yeah, if you can be consistent forever, that's probably the best. Or if you can from the beginning decide like, I'm going to do this in seasons, and that's what people are going to know that, and that's what they're going to expect. But that doesn't mean you can't change your mind along the way.
That's awesome. So when it comes to like analytics, do you know like the demographics or like the locations of most of your listeners, like where the pockets are?
Yeah, so most are in like US and Canada. There's like a bigger pocket also in Australia, which is kind of funny. I haven't looked at it recently, but I have had people like, I often will have people reach out to me from like Sweden, like I don't know what other, I'm trying to think of other countries in that like general area. And I think it's just like kind of a topic of interest in those areas. And it's just really cool that there can be connections across countries. And I know that obviously the culture is going to be very different, but still can connect on some level of a similar interest.
Yeah. Does it break down by states or like provinces at all? Or
You know what? I have never seen it broken down by that, but I'm sure that it does somewhere in there. Like maybe Apple Podcast does now. I've been wanting to explore it because their analytics have gotten a lot better. I used to be in Libsyn, and it was easy to kind of see at least the country breakdown. I think that it was like 50 something countries at one point that were just like, wow, that's crazy, Um, and now I switched over just because of the network that I'm with to Megaphone, and I really like that platform, but I have not gotten a chance to explore it too much.
How do you
with just go ahead.
how do you spell Libsyn?
It's Libsyn.
Okay, just just wanted to like note that.
Yeah,
Okay. Sorry, continue.
that's okay. So yeah, I need to like really explore just the analytics on my new platform and everything, but the new hosting platform. But yeah, it is cool to see that. I would say if I'm gonna guess like what states, I don't know. There seems to be a lot of like East Coast listeners that I've connected with, but
Mhm.
I think I don't know. I don't think that it's really there's like one place that I can point to and say there's definitely a lot of people in this area.
Well, I know we have like a lot of mutual followers, so that's why I was like, huh, this is interesting. So a lot of people
Yeah.
like Pittsburgh listen to you or at least know you outside of your podcast. So
Well, so I don't know. Do you know I saw I don't know if you want to pause the
yeah,
recording.
I'll pause it. So the last question that I have is, what was your ultimate like reasoning for focusing solely on an audio-based podcast versus having a visual element to it? And would you consider adding video in future?
Yeah, so I think when I started, that wasn't like a huge aspect. I don't think too many podcasts were doing that. I know there were some, but um so that was part of it. Also, that's like a whole different ball game to edit that and figure that out. Like I said, I do edit myself down a lot, so I feel like if I had to figure out video editing, that would be a whole different aspect. I just decided to switch from Zoom to Riverside FM, it's called.
Yeah.
It's in yeah, so that has a lot of cool features to where you can, easily get different clips of video. So I think I might here and there, like especially with episodes with guests, just start using some of the video for social media sharing. But I don't know. Part of me really likes just being able to tell my guests that they can show up like in pajamas and not have to worry like,
Mhm.
when people come on and they're nervous and they want to like look at notes, they always ask like, do I have to be looking at the camera for a video? So I think I don't know. I like where the conversation goes. I think it's a little more comfortable if you're not worrying about the video.
Yeah.
So that's part of my hesitation.
Before I let you go, I do want to ask, would you prefer this just be like an audio, or do you mind if the video gets uploaded? I have a blog that kind of chronicles my journey through this course. So like we have the
Yeah.
option to do either or. Do you have a preference?
No, no. Yeah, you can put the video on. That's fine.
Thank you so much for your time. This was
Yeah.
such a great conversation. I feel like I learned a lot, so I really appreciate it.
Yeah, absolutely. It was fun.